Thanks for being here. My name is Todd. I'm with Better Spaces. Hippie Chick knows this intro because she comes to every class. We partner with buildings and companies to create programs to help you connect, create, perform at your highest potential. And in honor of National Running Day today, is today really National Running Day, Paul?
It is.
Wow, okay.
First day of the month.
Mobility drills with Dr. Paul. Dr. Paul Kachowa, pronounce that right?
Kachowa, yeah.
Okay. You received your doctorate in physical therapy from Mercy College. You got a bachelor's in exercise physiology from Rutgers. And your treatment philosophy is move better, feel better, play better. So if you have a question, I think we're a relatively small group, so feel free to stay unmuted and you can ask a question or you can type it in the chat. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Dr. Paul.
All right, so let's kick this off here. Thanks, Todd. All right, I'm going to bring up my slides. So today we're going to talk about running better, just run fit, improving your mobility to start off your run off right. Like how many times when you go outside and you think, all right, all I need to do this run today is get my sneakers on, make sure it's not raining, it's a nice day outside, and just go run, right? So I want to kind of rethink that and do a couple things that will help prevent any injuries and also improve your performance. So make sure I got this on here. The first thing I have to say is that because I'm a physical therapist, I always have to put this, this disclaimer up here that this is not physical therapy. If you are dealing with something specific, a pain or an ache, please consult a medical professional. The stuff that I'm going to go over today, the information today, is very valuable and it's useful, but it is aimed at a general population. So just keep that in mind as we go through. Now, the next thing, I'll see if I could pop up this video here. This is basically outlining how the body functions. The body functions on this alternating pattern of stability and mobility. Now, if I pull up a picture of that, if this pattern is disrupted, then pain or injury is the result. So if we look at the lower body, the foot needs to be a stable surface for us to kind of work off of. And the next joint up is the ankle, and that needs to be mobile. And then the next one is the knee, and that needs to be stable, right? It only likes to bend and straighten, it doesn't like to rotate. And then the next joint above that is the hip, and that needs to be mobile. So that kind of goes pattern by pattern, stability, mobile, stable, mobile, stable, mobile, stable, mobile throughout the body. A lot of times people will run into issues when, for example, the hip isn't mobile. If that hip gets tight, then your body searches for that mobility that it's lost at another joint, and it's usually getting it from the lower back or the knee. All right, so a couple of things that we're going to be searching or looking at today are going to be based upon this alternating pattern of stability and mobility. All right, so the best thing is you need to get in shape to run. I don't want you to run to get in shape. Okay, so that kind of alludes to the first point that I said in the beginning. If you run just to get in shape, then a lot of times what I see is I'm like, for example, driving to work today, I see a lot of runners on the road, and I'm always looking at the way that they're running, and I can pick it out. If this is a good way, a good mechanically sound and efficient way of running versus somebody who has maybe like an ankle or a knee issue or a hip issue, the way that they run, their gait, the quality of movement is a little bit off. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is static stretching versus dynamic stretching. So static stretching is when you hold the stretch for a prolonged period of time. And generally I prescribe stretches that we hold for at least 30 seconds. Anything shorter than a 30-second hold, that soft tissue, that muscle pretty much snaps back into a shortened position. If we hold it between 30 to 60 seconds, then that creates permanent change in the tissue and allows that muscle to be long and not become short again. And dynamic stretching, the opposite, is when we go through a full range of motion and we're not holding on to any one position. Now, this becomes important when we apply it to sport or exercise or running. We never want to do a static stretch, a prolonged stretch, prior to any sporting activity. When we hold the muscle through that prolonged static stretch, research shows that it reduces the muscle's ability to create force. It actually weakens the muscle temporarily. We want, before our run, prior to any exercise, is to go into dynamic stretching, where we're going through a full range of motion, loosening up the joint, warming up the tissue, and creating more elasticity in a more dynamic way versus something that we're just going to hold on to. All right, and we're going to go over that. So this is the stuff that we're going to go through. We're going to go through a groiner, we're going to go through a hip flexor stretch and to the hamstring stretch, a glute stretch, IT band, TFL stretch. So the IT band is, the ITB is an iliotibial band that runs down the side of your leg and inserts right below your knee. The TFL is a tensor fascia lata muscle, and that sits like right into the top of your IT band. It's a muscle that really works on the hip and can affect the knee if you have knee pain. And then we'll go on to some glute and hip stability and ankle mobility. All right, so let's get into the interesting part here. I'm just going to transition into our two-shot. So the first thing that we're going to go through is thinking about, like, if you're going to go run, we want to improve our ability to extend the hip. If you've been sitting at a desk all day, you're rounded out, and then chances are that your hip is in this position. The body will adapt to positions that you put it in. So if we sit in this position for too long, this front line, this front hip flexor and hip and quad muscle can be shortened, adaptively short. So the first thing that we want to do is be able to kind of get into this extended position, right? To extend the hip, because that's what we're trying to do when we run. We never want this to be limited, this hip extension, because that creates a lot of issues for back, hip, knee, and all that stuff. So the groiner stretch is basically getting into this half kneeling position, a wide, long lunge stance. And what I like to do is kind of really drive the hip into the ground. And then we can even get more creative with this as we kind of push this knee out. And I'll show you on the other side. We can kind of reverse this. And then my hand is going to be on the ground and my arm is on the inside of the knee. And that allows my chest to get past this knee, and I could use this elbow to kind of rotate and warm up that hip, rotating that out. The next one is going to be going into a dynamic groiner, where I've got my hands situated on the ground, and I'm going to use them as an anchor point. I'm going to drive my pelvis forward and then drive my pelvis back. I'm getting a hamstring stretch as I'm coming back here, and if I drive my pelvis forward, I'm getting a hip flexor stretch on the other leg. So again, this is going to be an example of our dynamic stretching that we're going to go through. I would recommend somewhere between the same amount of time, maybe 30 seconds to a minute of doing this, but I'm not sustaining any one position. I'm going through deeper into the stretch and loosening that up as much as possible. All right. And the next one is going to be our glute stretch. And our glute stretch you can do seated. You can kind of, like, if you're outside or at your desk, you can kind of grab a curb or grab a chair, and we're just going to kind of pull your knee up, and you can kind of rotate that knee in, seated. Now, you can also do this in a standing position. So if you're outside on the trail, about to run on the road, we can kind of get into a dynamic glute stretch, where I'm going to pull that shin up vertically like this, and I can repeat that on the other side. So as I get through this, I'm getting a stretch into my hip, but I'm also working on balance and stability of the stance leg. So I'm just going to take that up and then repeat that a couple times. Again, somewhere between 30 to 60 seconds of constant motion to kind of loosen this up. All right. And then next, we're going to go into our IT band or TFL stretch. And what I like to do with that is, again, get into a position where you're extended, or we're kind of, show you on this side, this direction, to extend the hip. And then we're going to kind of reach up, and then we're going to reach across the body. And what that does is elongates this whole lateral line here. So if I show you this little oblique view, I've got my left hip behind me, and then I'm going to reach up and across with the body, and that lengthens that lateral side there, right? So again, dynamic stretching. You can add in the other hand. The right elbow goes back, the left hand goes up and across. And then what this does is really open up that lateral line and also improve some trunk rotation, because that's also involved with running. Not a lot, but there is a little bit of torso rotation as we run, just to counteract the pelvic rotation as we run. So that's our TFL and IT band stretch that you can do in standing. There are classic ones like the cross-legged, kind of doing one of these, but again, this is more of a static stretch, and we want to save that for after our run. We do the dynamic stretching before our run. All right, and then the next thing, to warm up the leg, warm up your body to improve the stability of the run, is working on your glute and hip. So once we kind of feel this the single leg stance, and then that thing that we did before, that glute stretch, we can kind of work it into our running posture. So what I like to do is focus on the standing leg. My right leg is going to stay down, and I'm going to pull my left knee into my chest. And as I do this, I don't want to rush into it. What I really want to focus on is getting my right leg to be as stable as possible. And if I show you from the side view, we're going to be, well, I'll show you this way so I can face the camera as well. We're going to pull the right knee into my chest as I work on standing still and balancing on this left. What's going on here is that I want this glute, this left butt cheek to fire, my quad to be on as well, so that whole limb is nice and straight and stable, and that allows me to pull this knee into my chest. All right, so again, nice and slow, but we're not holding any one position. We're just working on stability and balance on that standing leg. All right, so that's knee to chest. The other thing I like to work on is ankle mobility. Now, if we're running, I'll show you on my left side here, there's that split second where once our foot hits the ground, our knee has to go over that leg like this, and then we kind of do a push off. What tends to happen, especially with your technique of running, whether it be you know, a midfoot or a forefoot strike, that's part of the foot that's first hitting the ground, is that you can get really tight Achilles tendons and calves. So a good dynamic stretch for that would be to kind of get into this position here. I'm just kind of pulling my toes up towards me. And then that, if I don't get a little bit of a calf stretch there, I'm going to add this dynamic stretch to improve and include the hamstring as well. I'm just going to keep that lead foot straight, pull my toes up, and then I'm going to sit into that, reaching forward into my toes. I'm sitting back on my my right leg. I'm sending my my hips back, and I'm kind of just reaching for the foot there. And as I go down, my back stays straight. I'm not rounding out, so that maintains the stretch to my hip and the back of my leg. If I were to round out my spine, I can go all the way, and I'm kind of like searching for the stretch if I bend things that aren't supposed to bend. So we want to keep the back straight, get this hip moving, and then kind of reach forward, and we're going to repeat on the other side. So I've got my right foot out in front, toes are up, and again, we're going to reach forward, reaching long, and again, not a hold, just kind of moving in and out of that position, okay? Now, one other thing that I want to mention to you guys about calf stretching is that we want to maintain a good posture with your foot, like with that video that I showed before, is that the foot needs to be stable. It can't collapse. If somebody has like a flat foot, that is classified as an unstable foot. So a stretch that a lot of people that I see people do is that they get up on curbs or whatever, on steps, and they just kind of drop the heel down, right? So when they drop the heel down, you'll probably feel the calf stretch, but the foot is unsupported. When the foot is unsupported, what happens is that it actually exacerbates that pronation, that collapse of the arch when you're doing a calf stretch where your heel is not supported. So what I would recommend is that you get like I have this half foam roll here, and then we just go through the regular stretch that we just did. The front part of my foot is elevated, and I'm going to bring my pelvis forward, keeping my heel down. This allows for a much more stable surface with my heel down. And I like doing this with the foot, with the shoe on, because the shoe will also add to that foot stability and allow us to stretch out the calves without pronating into a flat foot. I mean, pay attention to that as you're doing your calf stretching after your runs. And again, we're going to try and hold this. This is going to be a passive or a static stretch, where we're holding it for 30 seconds. And just pay attention that when you get into this position, that your foot isn't collapsing into pronation or to a flat foot position, right? And we're going to hold that for 30 to 60 seconds. All right, so that's all of my spiel. I'm going to go back to our single, and just let me know if you have any questions. Just pop them in the comments, or unmute and then ask.
Question.
Yep. Go ahead.
Paul, so, like, my knees are sometimes pain in my knees, and I feel sometimes more comfortable walking than running. What are the different? Do I get as much physical benefit from walking as I do from running? And if not,
right. So there's a lot of things to think about when we're comparing running versus walking. So just like on the surface is like when you walk versus when you run, what's your heart rate doing? How much effort are you putting into the walk versus a run? So you expend a lot more calories, you get more of an aerobic workout when you're running versus walking. The load on the tissue, especially on the tendons and the knees and the knee joint, is going to be much higher when you run versus when you walk. And there's other ways to kind of mitigate that shock with running in terms of running technique and a lot of other things. But that being said, I always tell my clients that if you're looking to start an exercise program and you haven't done anything, and walking is the only thing that you can do, by all means, go ahead and walk, right? You can walk fast, do a fast walk or whatever, and increase your time and your cardiovascular system as you can do that. That is if only you can tolerate walking. But walking in itself is a very efficient motion. Our bodies are made to be upright and be mobile and locomote in walking, right? It's you really think about it, just basically falling forward with getting one foot in the way in front of you. So if you can tolerate walking, and also if you can tolerate running, I would prefer running for any exercise goals that you want.